Hello, Shayley.
Hello, everybody. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, pardon me.
My name is Shayley Timm. I'm the director of Gallery 110. Gallery 110 has been a part of the Pioneer Square arts community for 21 years. Our mission is to provide dynamic opportunities to established and emerging professional artists in an environment that encourages creative expression, experimentation, and collaboration. We are honored to have Nathan Vass's exhibition Present Perfect on display this month, as well as Sandra Fleming's exhibition Finding Form in the Invisible, and our new members show featuring Tabitha Abbott, Ruth Capshaw, Sanjita Nidhi, and Ingrid Sophie. But that is it for me. Thank you all for being here today, and without further ado, I'm now going to hand it over to Quinn and Nathan.
Hello, Nathan.
Hello, Quinn. And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's a real treat.
For basically everyone here, no introduction needed for Nathan Vass. He is a visual artist, degrees in photography, an award-winning filmmaker. Your recent film, And I Trust, was awarded Best International Film at the New Renaissance Festival in Amsterdam, as well as awards in Tokyo and Italy, right?
This is where I blush and cover my face.
As well as a writer of the nominated for the Washington Book Award, The Lines That Make Us, based off of your long-running blog, The View from Nathan's Bus. And finally, and most importantly, you drive the city bus at night.
Indeed. Right past here.
And so how beautiful. Your day job is creating art for us to partake in many different forms and mediums. And your night job is driving the city bus and living life. I think that's really wonderful.
I like the mix. It's a really fun mix and it goes well together.
Mm-hmm. And it's wonderful to see that mix embodied here in this audience. I imagine so many people come from different directions.
So many different parts of my life, and it creates a situation where whenever one friend from this part of my life is introducing me to someone else, they'll say, this is Nathan, who drives buses, if we're in a room of artists, and then if I'm in a room of bus drivers, this is Nathan, he makes art. You know, it's always the thing that I'm not there for.
It's really fun to Google your name and to see it come up as filmmaker, visual artist, civil servant.
Which one is it?
Yeah,
How many Nathans are there? Yeah, right.
It's very fun.
Yeah.
A little bit about me. My name is Quinn Hallenbeck. My degrees are in dance from the University of Irvine. I have worked as an arts consultant and a dramaturg here in Seattle with choreographers, writers, photographers, and recently on your films as well. That's been a pleasure. And it's been also my pleasure to get to know your work over a period of years, and I'm very thankful for this opportunity to share my passion for your work.
Thanks for taking the time to do this.
Definitely.
I really appreciate it.
And that leads me to my very first question.
Wow.
Which is more of a prompt for you,
Okay.
Nathan. Imagine for me, if you
Yes.
can. Will you please tell us about the first time that you took a photograph?
I do remember the very first moment. I was with my parents at the beach. I was a toddler, and my father showed me the camera and was like, put the camera right here on this rock. It's all been focused and set up, the aperture and everything, and wait for us to go stand over there and then press the button. And I still have the image. It's backlit. It's a medium wide shot of the two of them standing way out there, extreme wide, I guess. And it was very exciting. And when I think back on that now, we have to remember that kids playing on the beach in the 70s, taking pictures of each other, they would have had to know how to set the aperture and the shutter. Mm-hmm. and they would have had a certain discipline of this is what I need to do in order to take a picture. And it's different now.
How did your father take you through the process of explaining, this will take the picture, this is how you wind it, I've already focused it for you? How did he take you through that?
Because I think I was maybe 6, it was more, touch this, don't touch this. And then when you're done, do this. Yeah.
And your history growing up as an artist, that seems to track. You didn't start taking photos until late in high school. You started drawing.
Illustration was the thing. My parents are both painters, primarily in acrylic. I was the person drawing all the time. I loved animals. I hadn't discovered people yet. It was all about animals. And Tom Wolfe has said that illustration is the art form that will last the longest because it's impervious to technological improvement. It's just ink and paper. Mm-hmm. There's a lot to be celebrated there. But photography is a totally different medium. and very exciting to discover.
It is.
Yeah.
It's an exciting medium for the world to discover. It's one of the most recent art mediums.
Very recent, especially color, which although you could have bought color film stock in the 40s, that would have been very rare. Not until the 70s does it become easily accessible to everyone. 35 color in the 60s was a little too slow, but we have basically had access to it from the 70s until 2018, when the last large internationally renowned color darkroom, which was in Olympia.
Hi, welcome
closed.
in. No.
We had that art form last for about 50 years or so, and there's things worth celebrating about it.
It's an incredible art
Yeah.
form. I mean, the material reality of the art form. We begin
Mhm.
with Technicolor, which is exposing 3 different negatives at once.
Mhm.
We have a green, blue, and red, right?
And combining the color properties later.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
then we evolve in technology. Fujifilm, at its height, was producing 36 layers celluloid
Wow.
with different sensitivities on each layer. Really incredible.
And you had lots of different film stock to choose from.
Indeed, yeah. And it's incredible to see that technology take off in image creation,
Mhm.
to see people start to really experiment with it as its own medium, color photography. People
Right.
experimented very early on with black and white photography, but with color photography, we don't get techniques such as cross-process, bleach bypass.
Until late in
until
the-
later.
yeah, yeah.
Until basically your work, dare I say.
Oh gosh. And here we're choosing specific film stocks that do different things. We're making decisions in the moment.
Mhm.
Color, like analog film invites making creative decisions when you're taking the picture. Digital invites being creative after you've taken the picture. And I don't want to sound pejorative when talking about digital photography. It has great applications, especially in journalism.
It's unparalleled to take an image that
In low
quickly.
light,
It's
etc.
incredible.
Film demands a certain level of discipline, of technique, of patience. And this is not to say that I'm a better artist for using film, but it's to say that film ends up making better art because those things I just mentioned result in more conscious art making.
Yeah, our discussions
Yeah, more
ended up
considered.
our discussions ended up on saying that film photography is the physicality of a moment.
Such a great line, your line, and
Thank
it's
you.
excellent. Yeah.
Dare
Yeah.
I? Oh, thank you
Oh
very
my
much.
gosh. Yeah, because it's the photons of the moment that are landing on the actual film emulsion. Digital is translating a moment into a series of numbers. These are photons that have been trapped on a series of emulsive layers of silver crystals that are burned by light. And we're always trying to capture the past or freeze the present, and we of course always fail at that, but we're always trying to reach it, and photography comes pretty close at there's material residue of the moment
Like a sculpture, like a
on these
painting,
negatives,
yeah.
on these positives, and exactly, and in that way it might be closer, it might be more analogous to compare film photography to sculpture than to digital, which is its own medium.
Yeah, there's a physical kind of reaction, a chemical reaction happening, creating a crystalline structure on these film negatives that gets translated onto your color paper, which is getting harder and harder to find, these photo papers.
Yeah, and it's very exciting to me because although this is fascinating in a sort of gearhead type of a way, it also has emotional resonance. I hope that these images pop because of the techniques we're talking about, where the colors are screaming at you in a way where screaming is not the right word to use, where the colors are drawing you in and pulling you, because we are organic and imperfect beings, and so are these prints. When each one comes out differently, no two prints are the same, etc. And I think that's exciting. Yeah.
Indeed, to quote Elizabeth Bryant. Hi there.
Come on in. Please quote Elizabeth Bryant.
Yes. To quote Elizabeth Bryant, who wrote an article for this show in Art Access, Vass transforms these photos into authentications of emotional experience. He uses techniques such as slide film and cross-process to shift color and intensify contrast, adjusting not for the objective accuracy, but for the emotional truth.
Totally. We're not trying to capture what these spaces look like, but what they feel like. What did it feel like to be in front of this bridge? When you're standing here, immediately behind you is the Grand Canal, which is more photogenic, but there was something quiet, something private about this. And it would be possible to take a more, dare we say, objective image of what this space looks like, but other people have done that already. These spaces, Venice, Paris, they're wildly over-photographed, and so the only thing I have to offer is what was the authentic experience I was having? How did it feel to be there? And I try to spend some time like walking around the space, walking around the Colosseum. What can I possibly add to this photographically that hasn't been done already? And when I talk to classes of incoming film students who are really excited to become filmmakers, etc., I tell them there will always be other people, other aspiring filmmakers who have more money, who have more access to explosions and can make their images more flashy and sexier. You will not be able to compete in those arenas. What you do have, though, that they don't have is the authenticity of your lived experience. They can't touch that, you can. And so lean into it. And that's what I'm trying to do here.
To pull out some of my own intellectual thought and what
Please.
it makes me yeah, you're talking about an authentic experience. When we're traveling, and so many of your photos are while traveling, I catch myself reproducing images that I've seen online already. And like you said, someone else has the tools to make it flashy and sexy.
Right.
And your work helps me engage with a moment and ask, well, what am I really feeling here? What am I trying to document? And so it really improves my experience when working with the subject matter.
We're trying to invite an emotional rather than an intellectual response. That image there, which is a multiple exposure of the sky above Seoul with the city lights that are Seoul itself, of course impossible to see in real life, but hopefully evocative of the sensation of standing there. And that's all I have to offer.
And dare I say, that's been a modality of art for as long as we've been making art, whether it's cave paintings and Hasso, or art that has influenced you throughout the ages. And out of our discussions, I've kind of made a little whirlwind list of art history, and I'm sorry to bore you guys, but you've spoken about artists through the Gothic period.
I'm excited to talk about this because I often tell people I'm more inspired by paintings and cinema than I am by the history of photography, which I also love. But what do we mean when I say that? Which paintings, you know, what is the, so it'd be really fun to dive into this for a little bit.
Yeah, let's talk about, start from the Byzantine, shall we? The fall of the Roman Empire. People are creating images that are pointing towards something more. They're trying to use icons, images in icons, to have someone meditate on the beyond. Then we get into the Gothic era, where now people are representing reality.
The transition from the Byzantine to the Gothic is one of the most exciting shifts in art for me. We're moving from images only of the hereafter, from images that are communicating meaning with line, to images that are communicating meaning through tone and color. Taking from real life for the first time.
Yeah, Giotto was, people describe Giotto's work as more real than real.
Exactly, and his frescoes are very colorful now, but they must have been more colorful 700 years ago, and people must have been blown away by suddenly seeing expressive faces, three-quarter angles, all these new things that we take for granted. And yes, contemporary critics of the time would say, looking at a Giotto fresco and looking at nature, you can't even tell the difference. For the modern viewer, that's impossible for us to reconcile because we have photography. We have the Renaissance, but they didn't have those things. They're comparing what he's doing to what was happening before, and it's reasonable to say that he invented the concept of composition.
And when talking about composition,
crazy.
We have Bruegel and Bosch that influence your work, their sense of vastness. And also, a very famous painting is The Fall of Icarus, where there's just this very peasant scene, very landscape. It's huge, it's beautiful, it's giant. And then there's a small little dot in the ocean, which is Icarus falling into the water. And that is this artist's representation of that story.
He's taken in by the quotidian, he's excited by ordinary, the banal, normal life, which is what we're trying to do here, and also a perspective that's larger than life, conveying things that cannot be seen with the regular eye. And Bruegel would often take a vantage that we would call now maybe a wide-angle lens.
These vantage points, these perspectives gets developed throughout the Renaissance, both in Italy and in the North. We get incredible developments in realism, especially in the Netherlands, in Flanders. And we also get some scientific understanding of what is light looking like. And so some artists' points we have Caravaggio, Giuseppe de Rivera, and especially for your work, Vermeer, who is really encapsulating, not encapsulating, but discovering, salivating over the vagaries of light.
He's obsessed with light. And that picture over there is called The Art of Painting. Of course, it's a photograph, but Vermeer has a painting that's called The Art of Painting, and it's self-reflexive. It's a painting of a painter painting a painting. And this is likewise, we're overemphasizing the medium by having the vertical film strip, the attention to punchy blacks and hard, crisp light, unique to the form of photography, concentrated light in small rooms, a la Vermeer. Of course, it's not as good as Vermeer, but that's okay. We're sort of like doing our own thing in our own little corner here.
Yeah, the Vermeer choo-choo train's going by, and we're just tagging along. It's great.
Stealing what we can.
Moving through history, I'll try to like pick it up a little bit. I'll jump forward and then backwards. So we have the Hudson River Valley School, incredible light and detail. Thomas Cole, Albert Bierstadt, those paintings you grew up looking at and appreciating.
And it makes sense to speak of those in conjunction with Vermeer, because they're doing something similar where they're fascinated by the exalted quality of light, except in wide open nature, in vast nature.
Indeed, and to kind of round up our detail-focused artists, I'm going to jump forward to Escher, very famous for his illusion kind of drawings.
The like math stuff. But the stuff that draws me are his landscapes. Those Italian lithograph landscapes are so moving. He's able to create such emotion with just black and just white. And it's one of those, the bad carpenter blames the tools. You can do amazing things with something very limited.
Indeed, and then some more realists that influence your approach to art making. We have Henri Cartier-Bresson, who was a photographer in France, who spoke of the decisive moment.
And his photographs are nothing like mine.
Except for the
because he's
photo,
interested in people, and I'm too shy to go around taking pictures of people I don't know. That one's the most Bresson-like, but it's an anomaly in comparison to the rest of these. But I like how he talks about the pressing of the shutter is a reflex. You wait for the composition to arrange itself in the frame, and then boom, suddenly, oh wow, you just took a picture. And I like that, trying to like really feel the moment.
Huge. Yeah. And now to kind of go back in time again and focus on artists who are working with mood and the moment. We'll start with, before even the Impressionists, Turner, an English artist who was criticized for his use of color and his expressivity and, gosh, can't you just speak English, man?
Right. He anticipates Impressionism in interesting ways that other people have talked about. For here, I want to mention that the Impressionists are different from Turner in that they have different focuses. Monet, when he's painting those haystacks, he's scientifically fascinated with capturing the vagaries of light, the specificities of light. Turner wants to communicate, what does it feel like to be on this ship, or to watch this train pulling into the station, or to be in this thunderstorm, as whatever. And he paints in these very high emotion, high intensity situations where, like what I'm aspiring to do here, he's after what it feels like to be there, not what it looks like. He does have these super long titles explaining what's going on, because you wouldn't be able to tell by looking at his paintings. He wants us to know what's going on, but he mostly wants us to feel what's happening, and that excites me.
And of the Impressionists, Sisley is kind of...
Sisley's really cool, because you can walk into his paintings, and he's a little bit lesser known than Monet and some of the others. Manet is more focused on people. Sisley seems to be looking at the land.
Jumping forward, we get Edward Hopper. His use of light really speaks to you, his mood.
Even when there's no one in a Hopper painting, you still feel the melancholy. To picture a bunch of New England houses, and suddenly you feel sad and you don't know why. And he has such a great grasp of the light. Yeah, I feel like all good photos are actually photos of light.
And that really expresses itself in your love of the photos of Eugene Atget, a Parisian photographer working in the 19th century?
Early turn of
the century.
And he didn't know, he didn't start taking pictures until his 60s. You've probably seen these like empty Paris streets, Sunday morning, there's no one in, and to us, they're incredibly beautiful. He thought that he was just taking sort of data shots for painters to use as reference material, but they're just immaculately beautiful.
And then finally,
there's a humility in that I like.
There's a humility, and similarly, we have the work of Sally Mann, who has probably the greatest impact on your work.
Yeah, I learned about her at the very beginning of art school, and to see her working with glass plate negatives and other super antiquated forms of photography in the modern era it's inspiring. Why is she doing this? What does it do for her work? She welcomes the imperfections. And when I was going to school, to art school, we were not yet at the stage where film was obsolete. You were expected to figure out how to shoot film properly and do a good job. The types of imperfections that are in her works are the sorts of things that I would get yelled at for doing in school. Now that film is so much more rare, we welcome the light leaks in that image, the negative sprockets in a lot of these that I leave exposed that in school they would teach you to mat out. Or film grain. Film grain is exciting to us now because it's unusual. Before, we were always trying to minimize grain by using slow speed film and, oh, why can't we get rid of all these little dots? But now we love them because it's evidence of the process.
And this evidence of the process really shows through in Sally Mann's work and also your
Yes.
own.
And also, like, Sally Mann's landscapes are the thing that does it for me. She's better known for the pictures of her kids, but the landscapes are so evocative, so powerful. She can turn a picture of a tree into something meaningful. And I try.
Here's the case in point.
This is not as good. It compares unfavorably to Sally Mann, but these are the people I'm sort of like stealing from or trying to copycat their ideas and turn them into my own, etc.
And the way that Sally Mann is working, she's literally creating silver halide emulsion on these glass plates, and she's taking time with her medium, and it requires you to take time. Where nowadays, it's so easy to take a photo, you are almost doing it unconsciously, subconsciously. But when you're required by the technique to take time with the subject matter, you take a different photo.
It forces you to do a good job, to think more about what you're doing. I was reading film critic Kristen Thompson saying she feels that animated films are often the best films of the year. I don't agree, but I liked her reasoning, which was there is no room for improvisation in an animated picture. Everything has to be pre-vised and pre-thought out, and lots of thought has to go into everything before they spend time bringing in these actors to do dialogue and then not having them anymore. That's what they're stuck with, and they have to have planned for it. And there's something about that extra time that I think improves work. Yeah.
And I think through this brief exploration of art history as it's influenced you, we see your...
Thanks for listening to 700 years and 10 minutes, you know. we left out a couple folks.
We see where you get your inspiration in terms of your use of color, your interest in subject matter, your treatment of the light. And I appreciate that in your work, you're interested in calling back, but through the uniqueness of your own experience.
Yeah, it's hard for me to make work unless you feel you have something to say, you know, and I can't force myself to have something to say. It just has to come along, and especially with film projects, which take years of effort, I can't cause myself to make a film. But same thing with photographs. You sort of want to have the image be a response to the moment.
And you speak about how a photograph is challenged by telling an entire or encapsulating an entire experience in one frame.
Yes, and I remember looking at Norman Rockwell. If we put aside whatever political perspectives we have on his work,
in terms of subject matter,
he's so good at containing a narrative inside a still image, and that's very exciting to try for. It's very different from cinema, and to sort of try to load up a still frame with motion, with movement, with something suggesting cause and effect.
So you just dropped the big word, Nathan. On my list, it's in capital letters. Cinema.
Cinema. The other thing that I draw inspiration from.
Well, to go back in time, from that first time that you took a photo, you're drawing, you're painting, you're exposed to art books and music. You enter the world as a teenager, and the first film you see is Frequency?
A mid-budget, middling, not great, early 2000s thriller starring Dennis Quaid. Not a fantastic piece of cinema, but I found it overwhelming. I found it incredibly immersive. I could perceive that it was all the art forms combined into one, and that it was being repurposed in a way that, like, the medium was so new to me, I was unable to discern or have an opinion. Is this good or is this bad? I don't know. It's all so new. And then I went and saw Gladiator, which you have to imagine seeing this for the first time as someone who hasn't seen films. Suddenly we're being made aware of this. Here's this ancient world. It's a very convincing historical milieu that's being shown on screen. And I remember being struck by the images are deriving from the same stuff as all the paintings I grew up looking at. Rule of thirds, complementary colors, incredibly dynamic images in that picture.
Yeah, the sequence that sticks out in my mind for Gladiator, where for me convinces me this is art, I don't care how it's produced, this is art, is the sequence where he has just failed at defending his family, he's passed out from the effort, and he's being transported across North Africa by a slave caravan. And we get really punchy, bright whites and amazing oranges and all of these crazy
shifts
colors.
in film speed. It's the most editorially inventive sequence in the entire picture, and suggests like, oh, there's really things you can do here in this medium. My dad had I think it must have been an 8mm projector at home, and he had Charlie Chaplin prints, and he would play those while playing Scott Joplin on the turntable, and it was so exciting to see something like. I wish we still had that stuff, because it's the flickering film image feels like a living thing, and we all probably have grown up watching films projected on film, and you know how it feels to feel the aliveness of the image. You're looking at light shining through. I can't get over it.
Yeah, you speak about in our conversations in the past how cinema was the impetus for you to take photographs. It's like you're not going to get a full like studio set in order to make the films and trying to reproduce those. And so the closest thing that you could do is get a camera and try to do the same shots that you saw in Oliver Stone's JFK.
Right, because that film is 3.5 hours of people talking. Usually guys in suits in rooms talking. It could be incredibly boring, but it isn't. He's able to generate enormous tension with different film stocks, with high and low camera angles. Also, it's an incredibly dynamic visual environment. And I realized, oh, there's things you can do with photography to convey meaning. Composition is a language that we're using to talk to people, and if you're not aware of that, you're just sort of giving the viewer gibberish in terms of the language that you're conveying. But you can really do things with it. I saw Frequency, I saw Gladiator, then I started watching old films and sort of discovered the canon, and got very excited. You
spoke about Oliver Stone's use of different film stocks as a way of communicating meaning. That being an influence on your work and how you've approached it.
Half of my refrigerator is food. The other half is film. A lot of which isn't made anymore, or is weird film stocks or stuff I had to order from Thailand. And because you can get so much mileage out of this paper is specifically does good warm tones. That is good for cool tones. That film stock over there bleeds green when you cross-process it. And taking advantage of all that is just really exciting.
And to emphasize the brevity of the medium, again, only from like 1970 to 2018.
Very short.
And it's not until the year 2000 where we get Soderbergh, Iñárritu, and Tony Scott, the filmmakers, using color filters, bleach bypass, cross-process, multiple exposures to communicate with this medium. And it's
enormously impactful.
Enormously impactful, especially for you as an artist. And I really appreciate that you do exploit every single element of what film can do, and to bring it to this gallery. So that was a quick, 30 minutes, 35 minutes? Are we all doing okay? Do we need bathroom break or anything? No? Okay, great.
Should we keep blazing? Let's do it.
So take us, in this show, we have a couple of different ways of producing an image. We have what we're most familiar with. We have digital reproductions, these pictures of the Seoul skyline, as well as these trees, these yellow trees against the blue sky. Both of those are pigment on either, are they on photo paper?
Yes. I also want to emphasize they originate from film. They've been scanned. These are color negatives that have been scanned. Both of them are multiple exposures where we're taking a few shots on the same on the same negative without advancing the film. And then we're scanning the negative, creating a digital file that is then printed on, in the case on the one on the right, it's printed on paper that's then affixed and sealed onto metal. And then the nearer one is face mounted on acrylic. I'm trying to embrace the future. I'm aware that this method of creating images entirely by hand is not going to stick around. I always knew that color darkroom would go away first, and when I was in school, I obsessed over that because I knew I can do black and white later. We're always going to have black and white rooms, but color is going to go away quicker, and that's why I've just been amassing hundreds, possibly thousands, hundreds of prints while I could.
Yes.
Because you can't make these things anymore. They look great.
And the resulting colors are physically different. These are pigments that have been produced in a lab much more effectively than in the past, so you're not going to get as much fading as you would from different kinds of red.
Even if we compare that solo print to a film print equivalent of the same image, the digital scan struggles to understand the various gradations as we're very close to white. White in a digital picture is an empty pixel with no data.
It's zero value. Zero value. Yeah.
Film, on the other hand, is able to, like, you point the camera at the sun and it doesn't look gross. You know, it's able to comprehend all of the different whites and yellows. The skin has a lot of color in it, a lot of different colors, and those are two of the easiest places to spot the difference between film and digital in an image.
In terms of light, white light is the entire color spectrum, all contained.
And natural light is really exciting to work with because it contains so much color. A studio environment is giving you a single hue, generally.
And so
that's different.
So we talked about digital reproductions using pigment. We also have some wet lab prints, which is still like light sensitive paper being exposed to
Right, it's sort of a happy medium. It's when you went to Bartell's or Walgreens or whatever 10 years ago, that's what was happening.
But the form that we're really celebrating here are chromogenic prints. Will you please take us through the process of you've created the film negative, it's been affixed with whatever chemistry. Take us through the process of creating a chromogenic print in the darkroom.
So we've all watched movies where there's the black and white darkroom, or you probably went to high school where they had a black and white room, and there's the red light, and you go in there and you put the paper in the first tray of chemistry and you watch the image emerge. It's very exciting. Color darkroom is a little different. Color darkrooms have to be pitch black. You do everything by touch, and it's a dry darkroom. Instead of submerging your exposed sheet of paper in various baths, you put it into a large machine that is basically about the size of a car, and it has rollers that roll your print through trays of the various chemical baths that you would be using in a black and white room. And the print comes out the other end. It takes 6 minutes. You're forced to wait 6 minutes. To ponder, think about life, think about your picture. And I think that improves the quality of what you're working on because you have no choice but to sit around and pause. And then you get your image and then you get to look at it and decide, okay, I'm going to add 2 points of red or something. I like to work really fast in the darkroom. And so during those 6 minutes, I'm always just printing more prints because I don't want to wait that long. But I realize the value of being forced to wait for that particular image, because it gives me time to like, okay, is it worth it to print this? How am I going to do it? I need to not screw up.
You've chosen your image. You position it in a way where colored light is going to shine through the image. And we can see that in the artifacts of these chromogenic prints. If you're looking around the edges, you see the sprockets of the prints. This photo of the Sacre-Coeur is a great example. If you look at the very edge, this kind of lavender light is the exact shade of light that you were shining through to get that print.
Yes. In those, we're trying to take a little bit of lavender out. And so we're trying to take a little bit of green out because the picture was too green to begin with. And so we're pumping a little bit of magenta, which is the opposite of green, to dial down the intensity of the greens. And you can see magenta on the sprocket edges. And there's more extreme versions of that elsewhere, like that blue picture.
Receding childhood.
Yes, which has yellow on the edges. We're adding yellow to the image.
To get a blue pigment.
It was actually too blue earlier. And so that blue in the center of the picture has a lot of yellow in it. And I get excited by stuff like this, you know? I was taking a introductory lecture class for art when I was a freshman at UW, and the teacher was about to introduce a PowerPoint slide of a whole bunch of famous art pieces, and she said, none of what you are about to see is art. If you want to see art, you need to go to the museum or go to the gallery and look at stuff in person. These are representations of art. It's not the same. You have to go to the gallery and look at stuff. When we show these, when I show pictures of mine on my website or online to other people, I don't know what the color balance of their monitor is. Maybe they're looking at it on their phone. You can't control what they're seeing. And when we're talking about very sensitive color shifts, like in these pictures, it's really great when people can come in and actually look at this stuff and see, this is exactly what I want the viewer to see. And it's great to have that control.
Mm-hmm. And to also show us that this is the entire frame.
This is the whole frame, exactly. We haven't cropped. And it's sort of a like photo discipline thing of like, okay, I figured out the composition when I was there. And of course, sometimes that doesn't happen, but we do our best.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's been interesting reconciling our love of physical mediums such as color photography with a boon in technology, especially digital technology.
Right.
For cinema, for example, we've really taken advantage of the Criterion Collection restoring a lot of these original pieces.
Which we wouldn't otherwise be able to see in such good quality. Yeah.
It's incredible, yeah, to look back at Casablanca and not have a battered print that has been run 2,000 times.
Right, to watch a clean
To watch a
restoration.
quote unquote clean restoration, which is great for archiving. But I have to say, I love the charm of going in. I saw Showgirls at Stiff Cinema, and the print was just battered. And
it was not restored.
Yeah, and it's this narrative about a woman who moves to Las Vegas and is just totally eaten up and spit out by the city. And the same thing exists in this film print.
The print had been eaten up and spit out by the projector.
And I appreciated that kind of as not only as an intellectual kind of exercise, but also as appreciating the physicality of that.
You're watching something physical, yeah. And I think we're sort of at the peak of fake, and so we thirst for the real, you know? It's gratifying to touch something real.
Yeah, a Hugo quote that you turn back to many times when meditating about your work. Such scenes are sometimes sufficient for the soul, and almost do away with thought. To see 1,000 objects for the first time, and for the last time, what can be deeper and more melancholy? To travel is to be born and die at every instant.
He's writing about travel in that instant, but I would take those words to refer to how I feel when I'm looking at great art. And there's a exhortation in those words to be present. And a person doesn't need to know the grammatical meaning of the present perfect tense to enjoy the show, I would hope. Just that we can see that there's an emphasis on the ephemerality of the present. The present is perfect, but only for a moment. Of course, if they do know that what that verb tense means, and that we're trying to do something similar here, something that is present, but something that has been true before, but continues to have importance now.
And that play on the present moment, film being the physicality of a moment, and yet you claim that the photos you remember best are the photos that you did not take.
Exactly. I can see in my mind the moments when I failed to press the shutter, and when it was perfect, and then I didn't do it, or I did it too late. And I can also remember that the things that I didn't take pictures of are the ones that stick in my mind the best. The plane was landing at Tokyo Narita Airport, and you can see Mount Fuji, and the mountain was black, and the sky was pink, and you can see the roofs of all the villages down below. It was one of the most beautiful things I ever saw. The plane was banking, it was turning. There was no time to get out the camera, load film, check the aperture, you know. It's just not gonna happen. And I remember it because there was no photo taken. For the things where I have taken tons of photos, these images began to overtake my memory and replace my memory, especially the ones that are color. I know that my memories of standing on that street corner in Cuba are real because I remember what the colors were. But for these ones, that tree picture has totally erased the actual memories that I have of standing there.
And memory is such an emotional creature. When we remember something, our body literally activates the physiology of that moment, whether it was a traumatic moment, a joyful moment, things like that. And I really appreciate how you're able to reconcile film's techniques of control, where it's really asking you to quote unquote be perfect with every single exposure and whatnot, and yet you can let go and embrace the failure and put yourself into the moment.
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Quinn, because the print back there that's called Embrace has damage. That's the tail end of a film strip, which is usually tacked on to a roll of film in a way that you can't take a picture on it because there'll be a tear. And that's what that vertical thing is in the picture. It is a tear. It's a hole in the negative. And we're embracing the imperfection of it. And going with it,
so
because
much,
why not?
Yeah, and that happens many times with your prints as well when you're in the dark room. When you're printing, you create a number of test strips. You're testing what kind of light you're going to use, but you also recognize your own impatience as well as the necessity to work quickly. The medium is going to go away. You have a deadline.
Right.
And for this picture of Cuba, it's a black and white photo that you produced in a color dark room.
Which is why it has a slight color shift.
Yeah. And you've also allowed us vulnerably to see the light leaks of this.
Indeed, because the box that contained the paper was so old that light had gotten in. There's a little bit of light, and that's what that red is. It's burning the print. And we could never duplicate that. There's no way we could manufacture that, which is why the picture is so expensive, because I hope no one buys it so I can hang on to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the particularity of a film print, it cannot be reproduced.
It cannot be reproduced. And there's something special about that. You're looking at an original. A digital print cannot be produced, it can only be reproduced. A film print is something that can be made. Yeah.
Walter Benjamin wrote some theory about art in the age of reproduction.
Let's hear it.
In his theoretical framework, he's drawing a line between cult art, meaning art that one is initiated into, art that one must be taught to appreciate, art that is singular. He says that this cult art, cave paintings, church frescoes, they have an aura to them. That aura is this power about human relationship, and it evokes Kantian beauty, this beauty beyond the object itself. And in the age of reproduction, for Benjamin, was photography. He noticed that it's incredibly marketable, that there's not a singularity to it. He calls that exhibition art. Theorists have since taken this idea and realized the way that people go into museums nowadays, it's not a cult experience. You're not initiated into going to a museum and saying, okay, let's be quiet, let's stand back and look at the art and appreciate it, which is one valid way of appreciating museum. Museums nowadays are invitations to experience the exhibit, to become a part of the exhibit. Yayoi Kusama's work, Infinity Mirrors, is one of the most popular pieces of work, rightly so. They're incredible to engage with. And the way that most people choose to engage with them nowadays is an Instagram photo. And that is a valid way of experiencing this work, especially work that is exhibition focused. But in Benjamin's opinion, and opinion of many other artists going forward, we've lost the aura in this exhibition, in this reproduction. And
how does one restore that?
I can sense that you as an artist are really advocating for restoring this aura, this sense of cult experience.
Someone was asking me, what sensation do you want the viewer to feel when they're in this room? Of course, that's diluted because there's so many people in here. But if you were the only person in this room, how would you, the artist, want the viewer to feel? I'm reminded of the Vermeer exhibit in Amsterdam, which I'm not sure if it's still going, but it's historic in that, as we know, Vermeer only painted 35 paintings. This exhibit had 28 of them. And it was the first time that many had been in the same space since the 1600s. And they did not adjust the size of their exhibition space to make it smaller because the show is only 28 pictures. It had just as many rooms as their normal large-scale exhibits, and each room often had only one or maybe two paintings. And Vermeers are small, and it really made people slow down and take their time, and they realized, ooh, there's only 20-odd pictures here. There's no, they didn't try to beef it up with other paintings by contemporary artists, etc. It caused you to slow down, and it made, even in our time when we're accustomed to living and thinking quickly, you could see people slowing down, and I found that incredibly exciting. The exhibit also didn't have a lot of text. on the walls, and Vermeer paintings are incredibly ambiguous. What is this room that he keeps reusing? Who are these people? We don't know. We don't even know what Vermeer looks like. And that ambiguity was preserved. And that was really exciting to me. And so we've tried to follow in those footsteps of, I hope that there's a sense of quietude that would happen if you were in this room alone, letting these pictures talk to you.
Mm-hmm. Gertrude Stein, as you've relayed, says that the artist has a responsibility to offer hope, not despair. People can find despair all by themselves.
Easily. Yeah.
Hope requires more effort. Life sometimes appears to be primarily a series of struggles. I, Gertrude Stein, tried to make art that envelops this truth with additional perspectives, something closer to hope.
And we're paraphrasing her there. But yeah, basically, is what I have to say to that.
And to riff off that, Gertrude Stein comparing hope and despair as kind of two sides of the coin. One of my favorite philosophers, Spinoza, also sees hope and despair as two sides, where they're both united by their lack of information. That's the thing they have in common.
Thing.
They're almost the same thing. You're responding to a lack of information, and you can choose hope or despair. And kind of rewinding to the exhibition of the Vermeer, creating a cult experience, preserving the aura of these paintings in a museum.
And museums relatively new in the history of how we look at art.
Yeah, in the book, Voices of Silence by a French art critic that
André Malraux.
André Malraux.
I can say it, I can't spell it. Yeah.
He is looking at how art has existed in situ, at its site. Church paintings were made for churches. Frescoes were made to be on walls. Panels were meant to be revealed at important moments during a service. And yet we take these, we collect them, whether it's a Syrian statue, it's fragments of the Parthenon.
Right next to
each other.
Right.
In a museum. It's an artificial site.
A context that was not intended in the piece.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And yet that's our primary way. It's certainly my education is going to museums.
Comparative analysis of art. Yeah.
Indeed, this kind of quote unquote rational exploration. I read through, in preparation for this talk, I did my homework, and I read the Methods and Theories of Art History, which is just a collection by Anne de Avila of different ways of approaching art, and she does a great job. Early art historians were looking at iconography, icons. We expand into thinking about the form and what does egg tempera do, what versus oil versus now acrylic. We start talking about the frame and context. And a recent development in art history is the semiotics, signs, both spoken and textual, alongside signs of the visual. You received a question recently about your approach to semiotics and titling of work. And when you were responding to that question, you had some interesting things to say. To kind of start you off, one sign is the picture itself. It is a sign signifying the view from the Sacre-Coeur.
Sure.
And because of the use of language, and signs are very ambiguous, how do you use language and text to point the viewer, to frame the viewer into a way that you wish for them to experience the work?
I feel like I've gone through phases. There was the time when I might be tempted to call something untitled until my photo professor was like, don't be lazy, just call it something. You have an opportunity, just do it, just think of a title. And then I would go through a phase where I would call it something very simple and obvious, tree, bridge, bicycle, to sort of allow the viewer to have the maximum space to have their take on what it is. But I feel like we live in a society that loves naming stuff, and we may as well take advantage of that convention and do it with care. The title is the one opportunity for me as the artist to steer the viewer. How do I want to do that? How can I do that without imposing my own perspective on what it is? I want them to have their experience. These titles are all, I hope, titles that you would not be able to come up with just by looking at the image. Because if they were, then I wouldn't see the point in calling it that.
Yeah, they're signifying the same thing.
Exactly.
In terms of
Exactly.
analysis.
It's the same set. Yeah. And there's a line of thought from Eisenstein and Dziga Vertov, these early Russian filmmakers that were very interested in Soviet montage, the contrast of two moving images to create a third thing, the meaning. that the viewer creates by seeing this image juxtaposed with this image. We can think of something similar with the title and the work. If the title is merely supporting the work by calling this bridge, then we're not giving the viewer a lot to do. If we call this by your side, which is what it's called, we're asking the viewer to try to draw a connection. What's the relationship between the title and the work? How are these two things working in counterpoint? That's exciting to me.
Yeah, two artists that have inspired you to that extent of titling your work are Turner and Magritte.
Two very different things. Yes, Turner has the outrageously long titles that explain in incredibly good detail what's going on in the painting, because you can't tell by looking at the painting. Magritte is the best example of like title as counterpoint, where it's a picture of a large apple inside of a room, and it's called the listening room. And what are you supposed to do with that? You find yourself actively as a viewer engaging with the work. And I'm trying to do this. Magritte's funnier than I am. He's able to come up with these really clever things, and his paintings are fun anyways. This is not, we're not trying to be hilarious here, but we are trying to do something similar of, can we get the viewer to think about drawing connections? And that image is called Eternity. It's probably the most obvious of like, here's a title that works in contrast. We're showing what is very clearly a transient moment. And what are we inviting the viewer to think about when they see that?
Almost by titling it Eternity, we're drawn to the singularity of this moment. How at this moment in time, it was the center of the universe. And
saying it without saying it, exactly.
Yeah, something like that. Something I find interesting about your work and how it's been disseminated, especially your photography, is most people will find it first on your blog.
Yeah.
Especially in the context of a story that you've written. Tell us about your process of, you've written a story from your experience driving the city bus, and you were trying to select an image in counterpoint with the story.
I usually don't put a picture of a bus or of the location where the story took place. It's too easy. I want to give them, I was writing a post about drug use on 3rd Avenue. And it's a picture of the Space Needle. That's kind of an easy draw because we're talking about a condition in the city of Seattle, and we're showing an icon of the city. But hopefully we're also asking them to like think about these topics as they relate to the totality of the city. And other similar situations where we illustrate a challenging moment and we communicate something. There's a picture of something that's textured but also beautiful, and it might make them read the text differently. However, my website is such an inadequate space to look at images.
You've spoken about how you can't control someone's color settings
right.
on the monitor.
You know, you set up 5 computers and show the same picture on all of them. They're all going to look a little different, and I have no control over that. I remember reading a story of Paul Thomas Anderson sneaking into movie theaters playing his early films because he was obsessed with that he wanted it to be good projection quality, was the bulb dialed all the way on, you know, et cetera, and he was heartbroken because of course all the theaters are playing different things, and sometimes the projectionist just didn't care, and you know the reel changes are late and stuff, and what can you do except try to make something that will withstand that degree of deviation from what you want the original to be.
You know, it's interesting when taking into context, technique, presentation, and especially relying on other people to present your work for you. You have 2 options: either lecture for the rest of your life and be unhappy with your lack of control.
Totally. or
build relationships and embrace that and slowly bring people into the fold. I think a lot of the people who've come here today have known you, like we mentioned at the beginning, from so many contexts. And it's great for them to know your writing, know your personality from the bus, know your interests in life from those contexts. And slowly they've come to this kind of center where now they can look through your eyes and see these photos.
And they're seeing their experience of these pieces. I may be obsessed with like getting the color right and doing all this stuff, but there's folks who come in who love the work, and it doesn't matter to them. Hang on, is there a digital element involved in the creation of this? Is this on metal? whatever, who cares? It's them having an emotional response, and that's exciting and really gratifying.
So we've come up on our first hour, and we're going to break this up into two parts. When we come back, we'll be going through individual pieces, talking about their provenance, how they were created, stuff like that. Great.
Okay.
So we could go around in a circle and stuff. I'm going to start with generally about what I'm familiar with your work. You take pictures of landscapes, skies, portraits, and what else? Buses.
Yeah. Buses are so hard to photograph, although you would think it's easy because it's just a big rectangle. Like, to capture the drama and the pathos that I see in those rectangles is something I haven't perfected. And of course, they're in motion. And I get kind of shy, you know, when I'm standing there with my little camera, and the bus driver's probably thinking, "Who's that? You know, why is he taking pictures of me? You know, get away from me," stuff like that.
Which
I'm shy.
If you guys don't know, there's actually like a small community that takes pictures of buses in Seattle.
Yes,
it's incredible.
They're wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a little taken aback when I first met them. Anyways, yes.
And I actually thank you for bringing up the buses, because I actually think you treat the buses with as much grandeur as you do the Eiffel Tower or the Sacre-Coeur. And similarly, where you discussed earlier, you're looking for your perspective and experience.
Finding beauty in the ordinary.
Yes.
Continuing to like nourish that discipline or that skill of being able to be thankful for that which has become ordinary. Mm-hmm. And buses are so charismatic to me. It's like a huge uncle, you know, or like this friendly monster that supports the community.
And I like that you find the beautiful in the ordinary, and you also find the ordinary in the beautiful. So let's start with this Sacre-Coeur. This is a very famous cathedral in Montmartre in Paris. It is white, it's gorgeous, it's so easy to take a good picture of it because it looks good from every angle. Mm-hmm. And yet this is the angle that you've given us.
We're in it, we're on top of it, and we're looking out. It's kind of like this Venice Bridge picture where the actual interesting thing to take a picture of if you're standing here is the Grand Canal, which is right behind where we're looking. Similar here, where we're inside the subject of normal visual interest and we're looking out. What do we see when we're out there? You guys might know I was in Paris during the time of the 2015 terror attacks, and I was very close to one of the attack sites. And the city was completely locked down in a way that we now know what locked down cities feel like because of COVID. We did not know what they felt like in 2015. That was a completely new environment, and there was such a citywide sensation of grief, but also a sense of being stunned and a sense of silence and a sudden awareness of mortality. Death is so large, and we humans are really good at focusing on the small, on the day-to-day. I think it's a healthy defense mechanism, but to suddenly be confronted with the size and the weight of mortality, and to look out at that city and reflect on those types of things, it just felt appropriate to not look at the exciting historical facade of the Sacre-Coeur, but to look out at the vast totality of existence. Mm-hmm. What does it mean? Art is liberated from religion and philosophy's obligation to provide answers. Art can simply ask questions, even though it's dealing with the same subject matter. Mm-hmm. And I find that liberating. We're not trying to answer anything with those, but just to feel. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the way that you are feeling this vastness really recalls Bosch and Bruegel, their giant views, almost the view of an entity, whether belligerent or benign.
Looking down from above. Especially Bruegel, because you can't sense in Bruegel what the opinion or the perspective of the entity that's looking down is. With Bosch, you can perceive that it's probably malignant in terms of its opinion of humanity, but with Bruegel, you don't know. It's the vast and terrifying silence of the heavens.
And something that I appreciate about this view is we are the Sacre-Coeur, looking out over Paris. That's one way to read this work. And some other things that I find interesting in this piece being paired as two images is that you've taken one image, you've turned 90 degrees, and taken the next image.
Indeed, it's not the same parallel picture plane. One is looking south, the other is looking east.
Mm-hmm. There's an element of...
So it's the impossible view a la Bruegel.
Yes, impossible view a la Bruegel, a la Cartier-Bresson as well, used optical techniques to render wide expanses that would not have been visible just at the human eye. And you've also used a small aperture to make sure that everything's in focus. That requires a lot of light to hit the frame. Is this also a cross-processed film negative?
It does look cross-processed because it bleeds green, but this is actually regular color film with a blue and a yellow filter in front of the lens, adding up to green, creating this sort of bleached green type of view.
And green as a color shows up again and again in your work.
I love green. It's the center of the visible color spectrum. I think we respond to it easily and quickly. Blue is a lot of people's favorite color, and blue and green, if we go back on a long biological historical time scale, are something that humans used to perceive as the same color, and I like it.
Yeah, the linguists have a term like GRU,
Right,
which there's a theory, it's yet to be substantiated in linguistics, where people have first words for black, white, and red, then they have a color for GRU, which is green and blue, and then yellow, and then they differentiate green and blue. Yeah, that has yet to be substantiated, but it's interesting.
Indeed, and it matches the linear progression of the color spectrum.
Yes.
There's theorists who are like, why does the Bible not have any references to the color blue? Were humans not able to see it?
Why is the
Although
Odyssey
that's
a
fairly
wine
recent.
dark sea
Right.
when it's obviously the blue Mediterranean? But back to this work, to recapture something that we were talking about the process of chromogenic prints, you've used a light magenta light to render kind of...
To pull out a little bit of the green. I don't want the audience to suffocate.
When you're in the dark room, there are 3 primary colors of light. You play with magenta, cyan, and...
Yellow.
Yellow.
And you can get away with only using magenta and yellow, because turning the yellow dial means you're adjusting yellow and blue, because blue is the opposite and on the light color wheel. And then magenta is green. So you're controlling both of them there. You never need to touch cyan except to get rid of it, because I hate cyan. But the other two, yeah.
So Nathan walks into the dark room, immediately turns the cyan to 0, and starts. So that's our first experience of what Elizabeth Bryant writes in Art Access, death and eternity being present in your work. She also calls to mind Le Pont Neuf, which is in the back room. It's the first image. The Pont Neuf is the bridge that looks across from the island that has Notre Dame. So it's another...
Exactly, the Notre Dame is behind us. And I wasn't consciously trying to be anachronistic and be like, ooh, I'm gonna take a picture that's looking away from the Notre Dame and the Grand Canal. It just kind of happens. You're searching for what you feel in this moment, you're trying to find something unique, and it ends up being the light over there. And I love backlighting, so I'm often, the decision of what to take the picture of is where's the light coming from.
And this is definitely a cross-processed film.
It sure is.
And earlier you spoke about how film treats white with more deference and subtlety. Depth than a digital image can. It also does the same with black.
Especially in cross-process, because those blacks get so punchy, and it's crunching the range of contrast without becoming gross and pixelated.
Yeah, and distress. That is a chemical reaction. Silver halide, silver oxide crystals really getting crunched and just so stimulated and just so crystalline that they can't help but be this like dark mass. It's so cool.
And for that particular picture, which was overexposed, we're dumping a lot of light on it to get that much depth in the sky. The sky was not that dark in the upper left, but by just pouring light onto it, the more light you put onto a piece of photo paper, the darker it gets. Yeah. And
so far, both pieces that I've talked about are in the Art Access. If you wanted to get up and kind of follow along, you can see the differences as you're looking through of a digital kind of pigment representation of the film scan compared to the film chromogenic prints. It's especially, oh my gosh, in the Pont Neuf, like you can't even see the blues.
You can't even see the, yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I want to emphasize that I don't wish to sound pejorative of digital printing.
They're just different mediums.
They're unrelated mediums. They do completely different things, and I just want to celebrate what we've got here, film.
Yeah. On the subject of blue, let's talk about our next picture.
Can we
yeah.
some questions?
Yes,
oh, sure. I'm so sorry,
definitely.
George. I get very excited.
Yeah. Or else we would just talk to each other forever.
Do you have any questions,
Yes.
George?
Yeah. Can you talk a little about your choice to make this image into a technique?
Yes. Each image by itself of those two is okay. They're all right as single pictures, but together there's a sense of emphasis on the vast expanse of Paris. You're forced to notice the just the sheer amount of life that's going on out there.
Mm-hmm.
And
you've given equal prominence to the city and the sky.
yes, and usually the horizon in the middle of the frame line is really boring to do, and you want to either have it very low or very high, but here the sky is as equally fascinating to me as the sort of lower depths, as we might call it, of the city. And the human eye is drawn to difference and repetition. To steal from Deleuze, there's just the way we can look at ocean waves forever. They're almost the same, but they're slightly different. And here, we're invited to seek what's similar about these two images and what's different about them. I of course don't expect the viewer to be aware of the sort of gravitas of what I was feeling and going through when I took these images. They're going to come up with their own stuff. But something about the quality of the light, something about the sensation of standing there seems better emphasized by the two images together than by just one for me. As single pieces, to me, they feel incomplete.
Well, I stood in front of that piece, and I found myself unable to look at one or the other.
Wow.
It was involuntary. My eye kept moving from
Back and forth.
Right. So it makes me wonder. I don't know if you meant this or not. If that piece is also about the process of seeing, and I find that if you look around the room, many of your images do a similar thing, where you have a negative space down there, and you find yourself. I'm not sure people are conscious of it.
Yeah.
But that's like a reflection.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and it's difficult to see, but there's a figure in the middle of that image.
So I'm just wondering if this is a conscious thing you're doing, or this is coming out kind of naturally.
It's a great question, and I feel like to give an intellectual answer is making a supposition after the fact. I think that in the moment it's an instinctual response to photograph it this way or that way, but that instinctual response is born out of all the years of sitting around looking at paintings, trying to develop an image vocabulary that's vested in the lineage of art history, and hopefully causing the instinctual response to be more practiced, I guess I would say. And it's not a conscious decision, but it's the subconscious always seems to know so much more than the conscious mind does at any moment, and so I'm leaning into.
To recall Bresson,
this feels right. Yeah.
The definitive moment, is that what he calls it?
Decisive moment.
The decisive moment.
Yeah.
Where I really appreciate the way that you say that to intellectualize for you is to suppose after the fact. And in the camera, you're making all these choices, perhaps on a subconscious level, but almost searching, allowing the picture to come to you. You've also talked about in Western art, the idea is you can find, what is it?
You sort of create the moment because you're skilled.
But in Eastern art, the moment is there.
And you have to find it. Both are valid. Such a good question, George. We were saying something just a moment ago about
decisive moments.
Yes, when he's talking about responding instinctually by clicking the shutter, that response is born out of training and out of practice, and those things are going to help in that moment that is sort of guttural. It's not as though improvisation is ironic because it's best done when someone is very practiced, and if that makes sense. And so we're trying to have the artist be vested and aware of their training, and then allow them to hopefully create something that works, even if the decision made in the moment. It feels right to make this green, But if I were asked in the moment why, I don't think I would have an answer. And if I did give an answer, it would feel like I was making it up. Yeah, a supposition after the fact.
Can we hold space for any other questions about the artworks we've talked about so far?
I have a question.
Please, Jacqueline.
Please.
What is cross-processing and how does that affect how the images came out?
Great question. So there's negative film and there's positive film. And positive film we think of as slide film. And when you shoot on slide film, and instead of turning those into slides, you process that in chemical baths intended for negative film. You're processing it in the wrong chemistry, cross-processing, and that transforms your positive film into negative film. Depending on the film stock, it'll have a color shift, and it'll always become very contrasty. Kodak is good at warm colors. When you cross-process it, the cool tones become very potent, a la that Pont Neuf painting, or this one, or photograph, excuse me. And when you cross-process Velvia, which is good at cool tones, it becomes very potent with its reds and its other colors where almost nothing survives except the warm tones. And it's volatile and unpredictable, but you can sort of wrangle it into control the more comfortable you get working with it. And I go through phases where I think I'm only going to ever shoot cross-process because it's the most high-impact visual. It's the most contrasty. The eye is drawn to the point of highest contrast generally, and so it's very exciting to work with. And it's the most analog that you can get in terms of shooting analog because the color tones are often well outside the range of a digital color gamut. And when I was in the darkroom, I would try to print as many cross-process pictures as I can because I know these are the ones I very much will not be able to make later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah. Yeah.
We're running out of time.
Please.
Sorry.
Thanks for
Do what you
stopping
gotta do.
by.
Great to see you
So good
both.
to see you. Okay, I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's keep talking about your color images, and then we'll kind of loop back around to your black and white, especially the Cuba, Didion, and Embrace.
Mm-hmm.
So you've mounted your images in a few different ways, on acrylic, metal, even on wood with acrylic paint. Can you talk about your decision to mount these? Let's start with this
Mounted
picture of
on
Paris,
wood,
yeah.
it's an attempt to tie the tradition of photographic image making to an earlier lineage of painting. Photography, you might say, was invented too late to be taken seriously compared to the other art forms. It's pretty recent, especially color. And so to put it on wood, to cover it with acrylic gel medium, is trying to sort of do the same thing that Tarkovsky, the filmmaker, would try to load his films with classical music, with paintings, because those are much older art forms. And he was like, I want people to take film seriously. And so he would put a Schubert or something in there. And here we're trying to do something similar of let's tie it back to painting. Let's remind the viewer of this longer lineage and let's celebrate it. I love when people accidentally call these works paintings. That's like the highest compliment I could hope for, because I have so much respect for the art history canon and so much fascination with it. For printing on metal and face mounting to acrylic, these are new methods, and I'm trying to embrace the future. If I can't keep doing darkroom, I have to do something, and there are things to get excited about this. You know, I want to flow with the movement of time, not against it. And printing on metal has its own fascinations. It's very good for preserving grain structure on those black and white images. It looks different, very different than a film print would, but it also has its other virtues.
And you were working closely with the shop that did this printing for you.
Yeah.
And you were also trying to see if you could create archival copies of your film prints. You took in one of your film prints, and the expert said, "Oh, I can't make that green." It was incredible.
Because it's outside what's possible on a
But he
computer.
did a very, very good job.
He's good. He's really good at what he does. Yeah, he got close. Yeah, and so that's the reasoning behind trying out these new methods, and you know, I need to not become a curmudgeon and only talk about how great this now defunct methodology and approach is. Yeah.
Let's talk about these two right behind us. Do you have a question again?
I
Sure.
love when you ask questions, George. Yeah.
Well, you have, I think, three images that you did use that technique in. This one, that one, I think there's one more.
Yeah.
in there. Are the marks, we're seeing your marks?
Yes, the brush strokes. That's me taking a coarse brush and applying acrylic gel medium to both the front of the image and behind it, because it works as an adhesive to attach it to the wood.
Because the marks make it more physical, and it's one reason why these look like paintings, and they do very much look like paintings.
Awesome.
So, also the subject matter, you're doing they're very ethereal. We're forcing the viewer to look back. You're forcing me to look back on myself, and you're doing the same thing with this image, except it doesn't appear to be. I mean, it's obviously a photograph.
Right.
Whereas this,
What is it?
if you had the tag said it is a painting, I would believe it.
Wow. Gosh, thank you, George.
And part of it is the subject matter. That it's hard to focus on one thing, especially in this.
Yeah.
So your mind just starts making up things,
Drawing connections.
taking it out of your normal experience. And it's a little bit similar in this, where we try to recognize something.
Yeah.
And if you can't do it, essentially you're stuck.
Yeah.
So those are the things that are, to me, are really interesting about these
Thank
pieces.
you. It's great to hear your perspective. The method doesn't work well when it's applied over a very obviously clear photograph type of picture. I tried on a couple of other images and it just didn't work. It works best when the picture is already somewhat abstract. Yeah.
These work. These work.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we've discussed these new processes for you. Now let's return to kind of more familiar processes. And these two next to us, George was already drawing a relationship between painting and photography, the physicality of an ethereal subject. These images can be spoken about very technically. Like, it was this kind of paper, which is no longer made, and it has these kinds of qualities and warm tones and whatnot. Instead of going through that whole canon, let's talk about how you're trying to create a memory, create a feeling. One of these images, the Venice Bridge by your side, is difficult to make out the subject matter exactly. And the right decision of this tree in the desert is a very clear subject matter, and we can discern it. And yet, they're both pointing to the same kind of experience.
The solitary, there's a theory that all great films are actually about loneliness. And it's one of these exciting theories to talk about because it's unprovable. And you can just go in circles about it. But so much of human life is experienced singly, individually. There's so much that we think, but it would be too esoteric or too inconsequential to take the time to share the thoughts you have when you're tying your shoe or hanging your coat on the door. And these are I was very private and alone in these moments. And I've had people look through my pictures before and say, "Oh, Nathan, your pictures are so lonely. I just feel so lonely when I'm looking at your photos." And it's exciting that comes through. I think, I wonder if loneliness is the premier human emotion that the most people feel the most in terms of making it through life. And this was the first morning of my first day in Europe, which is by myself. I like to travel alone. And you feel the intensity. I felt the intensity of that solitude as in the context of excitement. I'm here in this totally new space. I was traveling without electronics as a conscious choice. I had my map and my guidebook and stuff, and here I am. There's no person next to me that I have to make sure they're having a good time. There's no intermediary between me and the world, except the camera. And so that's how I'm choosing to interact with that space, and it was very gratifying. Here, I don't know if, they say it's good to discuss the what, the when, the how, the where, but not the why. Self-reflection should take place in private and not on a public stage, so maybe I shouldn't be sharing where this picture is coming from or why, but we will anyways, because you guys took the time to come out here, so I want to share with you. I had moved back to LA, which is my hometown, to finish school, and I had thought that I would pursue a career in Hollywood making films and go to film school, and quickly I found myself dissatisfied with the sort of attitude and lifestyle of the career ethos in Hollywood and the emphasis on status. And I discovered that I wasn't a good fit for the type of art making I wanted to do. And I chose to move back to Seattle and finish school here in photo. And when you're driving back from LA, you pass through Bakersfield and some of those other smaller towns, and then you go over these mountains in the desert, and then you come out, and then it's more desert, and you take a break before you know that you go through like 10 hours of cornfields or whatever all that is. And I always find myself pulling over in the same rest stop that's after the mountains that are after Bakersfield. And I wouldn't be able to identify it on a map, but I pulled over. I felt so good because I was returning home. Every turn of the wheels of the car was a movement in the right direction. I felt I had made the right decision, hence the title. And I found myself in this rest stop that was oddly familiar, and I perceived, oh yeah, I've stood here before. I've looked at this tree that's like behind the bathrooms. And there was just this uncanny feeling of connection with the universe, of this is a familiar space. And it invited the taking of a picture that was not aesthetically complicated, but simple and clear, and just a very straightforward centered composition with the side light. And that's where that's coming from.
And I really like how these have been chosen by the gallery to be presented next to each other.
The arrangement, so much of the power of these comes from their arrangement. And that's thanks to George and Shayley. They're the sort of dynamic duo for whom so much of the great work at this gallery is responsible, and the hanging crew at large. I did not participate in the arrangements of the images, and it's exciting to see the connections they drew. Yeah.
Sticking with the subject matter of the Venice Bridge, the way you were describing your experience in Europe made me think of the Situationists and Guy Debord specifically. This is the 1960s in Paris. A lot of philosophers and artists think, gosh, everything is just the spectacle. Can't we get back to the social? How can we do that? And Venice is a paramount example of dérive, this something akin to wandering, allowing yourself to be open to experience and experiencing the city. Venice is contained enough where you can wander safely and not starve to death.
Yeah.
But
you can get lost, and it doesn't
lost.
matter because you'll run up to the canal or something else.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's one of many things that I feel while looking at this picture. But to open it up to either anyone on the floor, any questions?
I really like hearing the background of where your title's from. And when you said by yourself, I'm like, what? I imagine someone with you there taking the photograph, but the way you told the story, it sounds like your camera's talking to you.
Yeah, it's the you know, you're like alone in Florence and you're walking on the Arno River and there's all these other couples that are making out and you're by yourself and you feel this sort of melancholy that causes you to feel very immersed in the present. Hugo writes that I think it's in Toilers of the Sea, he says, melancholy is the happiness of being sad. You know, it's sort of relishing that sensation of I'm here and I'm present, and how can I engage with the present? By making art. It feels so good to do. Yeah.
I noticed that one in particular isn't for sale.
It's too special to me. So, and some of the reasons for that are, it was made on Kodak Ultra Endura photo paper, which doesn't exist anymore. It didn't even exist at the time I made this picture. It was a box that someone had given me. I finally had access to this paper that's really good at doing warm tones. And the paper had been rolled up for a long time. So it's rolling, it's bowing at the edges. And that's why it's starting to curve at the edges, sort of like an old tube television. And that's also causing the paper to lift up from the surface that it's being laid on. It's starting to go out of focus on the edges. And that makes us notice the focus in the middle of the print all the more. And I can't do that anymore. I only made one print. Why didn't I make more on that paper? That's all I have. I do have other prints, a couple other prints of that same image, but I wanted to show you guys, here's the best stuff. Jacqueline, you had a thought earlier that we were talking about during the break that I was excited about.
Oh, you mean about,
Remind me.
well, it was two thoughts. It was either that perfect can be a verb, or it was, you were talking about, I didn't know how color photos were printed, and you were telling me how color photos were printed,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, you mean you have to wait for it to come out, and if you don't like it, you have to do it again? And
Yeah, and you're forced to wait, and also in a black and white room you can control contrast because you have contrast filters and you bump up the contrast to make it look cooler. In color there is no contrast filter. Your contrast choices have to be based on the film stock that you chose a month ago when you took the pictures. And so that's also part of the reason for cross-process, for overexposing slightly and then printing a little and then sort of over-printing is a way of also pumping up contrast. Yeah.
That contribution made me just realize, boink, present perfect, present perfect.
Right.
And it's
adjectives and verbs.
Yeah, very interesting. The ambiguity of that, and your images are incredibly ambiguous in their sort of, especially your multiple exposures. And the ambiguity, for me, opens up the space for experience.
Photography has allowed us to get at those moments that take place in between moments almost. Like, I think Degas' paintings do this too, where it's like there's a lot of negative space of these dancers practicing. This is almost like a haphazard camera shot. And when you're photographing people especially, you can take a picture of that moment right when they're deciding to smile, when their expression is enigmatic. You know, there's Da Vinci, and then there's the camera that can do that, in Vermeer as well. But yeah.
And then the hand of Antonello da Messina's Annunciant version.
The in-between moments. Yeah, it's nice to try to get at that with photo.
And talk about eternity.
Right.
Yeah, and that's an in-between moment. Before we move on, anyone need to... Hi folks, welcome in. And this is kind of a question about your evolution in practice. Where are you going to go next? Color darkrooms are almost inaccessible unless they're privately maintained, and you can't guarantee their quality.
There's rumors that someone has a small color processor here in Seattle, and I have mixed feelings about this. I spent so much time emotionally and physically preparing for the end of this medium. I knew that the color darkroom, the last internationally renowned color darkroom in Olympia, Washington, was closing in 2018. I went to my boss at work, explained to my boss, I started talking the whole history of photography, here's why this is important, and they went for it, and I got a whole month off to just go crazy making prints. And I was able to say goodbye to this medium. I have these flat file, these incredibly ungainly flat file boxes at home, where it's 500-pound boxes of drawers of images, of prints. And I felt like I was able, I remember the last picture I chose, you know, of this medium that I went to school for this. I was the last group of students at UW to be taught color darkroom. And this is the end. I was able to say goodbye. Life is a series of endings. Often we don't get to say goodbye to stuff. When we do, it's worthwhile. You gotta grab it, it's fulfilling. And I felt good. Then 5 years go by and I hear that maybe it's still possible. I have mixed feelings about that. It's kind of like you spend years processing this breakup or this divorce. Finally, you've gotten to a place where you're okay with it. And then they come back around and say, I'm available, I'm available. You don't want to hear that. You're done. And so that's why I have mixed feelings about the fact that it might be possible that there are rumors floating in the air.
But black and white film
yeah.
is still produced.
Black and white, readily available.
Yes.
Yes, and color film is easy to purchase, but it's gotten expensive. A roll of Ektachrome is $20, used to be $5. Yeah, yeah, unbelievable.
And only one company, Kodak, is active. No, there are multiple boutiques companies, but
a couple, but those are specialty things, and they're often aimed at people unfamiliar with film practice. It's like sort of a novelty, the lomography thing or the cinestill rolls. This is not professional grade film.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
professional in the terms of consistently predictable interaction and
Exactly.
results.
You're not quite sure how this is gonna turn out because this is actually expired film that's been repurposed from motion picture film that's already expired, and you don't know what's gonna happen. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah.
It is. It's legitimate, but it's different from, you used to be able to go to Glazer's and there were 10 different rolls of color film that you could choose from. They all did different things. You knew what they were, and you would decide on the basis of that. It's a similar thing in motion picture where now there's only one motion picture film stock made, Kodak Vision3, and it has a very neutral color palette because they know you're going to scan the negative and digitally affect it before you put the movie out. That was different before. Before, there was just this laundry list of different stocks. Fuji doesn't even make color film right now. It's a different ball game, but you can still go buy it. You can buy Ektachrome. That's huge. They stopped making it for years. Now you can buy it. It exists. It looks good. Yeah. Yeah. We were talking about eternity over here. It is, I cannot take credit for this being a good picture. Garry Winogrand, the street photographer, shot so much that he has more pictures that have never been developed and seen by himself or anyone else than we do have. And we have a lot, because he shot a lot. He was a street photographer who just endlessly, all these great mid-20th century images, back when street photography was really big. And he would set a very high shutter speed so that he didn't have to focus. And instead of asking permission to take pictures, he would take the image and nod and smile after taking the picture. And people don't remember him taking pictures, they just remember him smiling at them. And that was his secret strategy. I'm not that brave, I'm too shy, I feel like I'm invading someone's privacy to take pictures of strangers. I take pictures of people I know. This is different, where I did have the aperture set very small, just in case something happened and there wasn't time to focus, which there wasn't, because this happened so fast. And they just flew by, and it's a miracle that they land in front of that white pillar. I did not time that. There was no time. And it's a miracle that his pants happened to be in focus. It's sheer fortune and luck that turned out as a reasonable image. And the fact that it's on paper that's damaged is exciting to me because it seems to fit with the subject matter, the ephemerality of it. Yeah.
Sounds like the whole picture is a miracle.
Yeah, I'm the vessel. Something else made the picture good. Yeah, not me.
Well, your work is an interesting juxtaposition to studio photography, like Annie Leibovitz, for example, who has ultimate control of the lighting.
That must be really exciting.
Yeah, very exciting, and a different discipline and approach.
It's very different. This is coming from the background, and going back to what you were saying earlier, George, about is it a conscious decision, etc. I feel like thinking should never happen when making art, only before and after. And in the moment of the actual making, hopefully your training, your practice, your perspective is what's carrying you through, and you're not sort of you're not intellectualizing in that moment. You'll do that later. And that'll be helpful, but in the moment, you're just boom, click. Yeah.
You've grounded your practice in consistency. You've worked with the same cameras for decades. You've worked with the same lenses, and specifically lens lengths. You pretty much only work with 50 or 28 millimeter.
28 is better. Yeah. I know 50 is supposed to be the standard, but I don't think it approximates human vision very well. It seems slightly too zoomed in. 28 is just a nice, full, wide thing.
Yeah, it creates a wider image.
It creates a wider image, and it forces discipline, because often, if you're looking at people's amateur pictures, you can tell the photos would be slightly better if they were a little tighter in, That's almost always the case. And with a 28mm lens, which is wide, you have to decide what to do with your composition. And I like that. And I like using, there's a particular lens I like putting on my Pentax camera body that's slightly too large. It's a little too small for the camera body that's on. It creates a vignette. And some of these images have, like the Paris pictures over there have what look like vignettes on the edges. I didn't burn those in the darkroom. The lens is actually a little too small for that camera body, and I like what it does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, embracing that imperfection. And of this subject matter in eternity, how much of the film strip was there? Like 10 photo negatives, and this is the only one that really.
I've got, I think, 2 or 3.
Oh gosh,
yeah.
It was so brief.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Happens fast. In the 90s, which I think were a good period for film cameras that have digital elements, where it's easy to multiple expose. It's easy to prevent the film from winding forward before taking another picture. Pentax is nice because they never changed their mounting system when digital cameras were invented. All Pentax lenses work on all Pentax cameras, and that's unique. And you can do a lot there. But the older cameras are good as well. The Pentax K1000 didn't change its body design for more than 20 years. Imagine a car that stays exactly the same for 2 decades because the design is so good. Those are unbreakable machines. They're so simple. And when you're driving down the road and it says red light camera enforced, there's a little picture of a camera. That's a picture of a Pentax K1000. It's just sort of become our internal visual vernacular of what a film. No one shoots on those anymore unless they're students, but that's what we think of when we see a camera or think about.
I love when I was getting your advice. I'm like, wow, you're really inspiring me to take photos. What should I get? And you're like, Pentax K1000 made in Japan, not Hong Kong.
Those are the best ones. Yeah, the Asahi Pentax K1000. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, can we answer any questions about practice or general questions about his work before?
5 minutes remain. Yes, Shayley.
This is something that I always like to ask artists about. It's always so different and fascinates me. How do you determine when a print is final? Like you run it through, you look at it, and with no other color edits are needed, this is done.
How do you determine when a print is final?
Again, I wish I could find the words to articulate it. It's that knowledge, it comes inside that moment that doesn't have thinking going on, where you're running back and forth in the dark room and it comes out and you look at it and it only takes a second of looking at it and you know this is done. It's kind of like how they talk about appraisers whose job it is to evaluate whether or not a piece of art is real or fake. And it's an instinctual, instant response. Somehow they know this is not a real, and it's similar where you just know this is good. And of course you inspect it. Are there flaws? Is the print dinged? Is there something that needs, is there dust? Is there hair?
If there are flaws, do I like them?
Exactly. Do I embrace them? Is there time to do another print? But it's this strange instinctual moment of, ooh, that is exactly what I was hoping to accomplish when I was looking through the viewfinder. And when you're looking through the viewfinder, you never know if it's going to turn out. You might think it's going to turn out, but you just don't know until you get the print back or get the negatives.
Something that I reflect on when I think about flaws is what perfection is in the physical world. A diamond is perfect. It's only carbon, but so is graphite. Graphite is also perfect. It's only carbon. Perfection can be clear and beautiful, or it can be brittle and dark. But when we look at other gemstones, especially sapphires and rubies, they are the same crystal structure. The only difference is their flaws. They're imperfections. And so when I am engaging with art and artists, I really luxuriate in that kind of flawed materiality, because that is where, for me, the truth lies.
What a great note to end on. Thank you, everyone. I can't follow that up with anything.
Thank you so much for coming. Let's all hang out. Sounds like a good time.
Please mingle. I want to say thanks to all of you guys. Yes.
it's a different process. How Mozart, it's all here. And he just wrote it down like a
How? It's amazing.
Big when you know it.